All right, Chris, we are rolling. Thanks for coming
All
on the
right.
podcast. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
I mean, I've been wanting to actually get on like some composers and people who are more musically inclined. I did one, I think last week, or that was released with a friend of a friend, and so music is one of those things, especially when it comes to film, that I like. I ad- it's one of the few areas I admire more than my own like niche that I like to do. You know, with like writing or directing that sort of thing. Because I think with music, it's the it's almost the real dialogue of the film if it's done right, in my opinion.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So
I completely agree.
you've been doing music now for about 30 years. Is that right?
I have, yeah. Yes. So going into like more of a film comp direction, because I've been in bands and a musician and a music producer, not professionally, but just for fun, just always been something I like to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided probably about a year ago that I was like, I've always loved film scores more than the movies most of the time. And I mean, I love film, but it really is the music that makes the film. And for me, I'm just a music nerd. So like, if a bad film has an amazing movie, or I'm sorry, an amazing score, I'm going to probably still like that movie, or vice versa. If we have a
Mm-hmm.
fantastic movie and it's the music's like, it's I probably won't watch it again. So I realized at a very young age that I was obsessed with music, and honestly, most of the movies I enjoyed, even growing up, have really were based on the music. Um,
Like what?
some, well, just I was thinking, well, if I go back to like when I was a kid, um, I would say like John Williams had a huge
Mm.
impact on me. I was a big fan of, Star Wars, and then you have like Indiana Jones and things of that nature. And as I got a little older, because I'm an older gentleman, not that old, I'm just kidding. But as I got a little older and Lord of the Rings came out, and then you start realizing
Oh,
like
that'll make you fall in love with it. That'll make you,
yeah,
even if you're
yeah,
not
Howard
into music,
Shore,
that'll make
and
you fall into it. Yeah.
yeah, I think what really, I mean, I know like I'm 38 right now, but I would say I was a teenager when my first introduction to understanding or being aware of what a soundtrack or a score would really entail was, and I just recently talked about this on my podcast, was um, my uncle lived next door to my mother, and I would pop in and just say hey, and ask how he's doing, or just mess around, just joke around with him, whatever. He's a funny
Hmm.
guy. So I go over there one day, and he's just blasting music, like, and I'm like, and it's like movie music. So I'm like, why are you listening to this? It's like abnormal for him, right? And it was the Dances with Wolves soundtrack. So he's just like, he just
Oh,
stopped.
that movie. Yeah.
And so he's just
Mm.
sat me down and he said, we're going to listen to this. And we did. And I was just like, man, like, I don't know. At the time I was in bands, even at that age, like I was 11 or 12. I mean, I've been in playing guitar since I was a preteen, and in bands. And as soon as I started playing with people. And so I did that for a long time. I played in some, more extreme metal and prog metal bands just because the musicianship was a big scene in Michigan at the time.
Mm.
So I decided to go down that road, and I had some fun with that. And in the meantime, I was still like, still producing, on my own free time, some EDM and dubstep just to have fun, right? Because I just want to keep in the loop
Oh,
of
yeah, that had its phase. That was a good
yeah,
phase. That was a
it
good
was a
phase.
cool phase. It was a
Yeah.
fun phase,
Yeah, it
absolutely.
was.
Um, and so yeah, I kind of been all over the place. And then also like in middle school, I was in jazz band. So I mean, I love jazz too. So I like will learn a lot of jazz music and stuff like that, or try to. Um, so then I guess I don't want to just keep. Is it okay that I'm just ranting? I don't know.
Yeah,
I
go
don't know
ahead.
the formula.
I'm not
Okay.
afraid to interrupt you. Don't worry about that.
Okay. Cool. Good. Cool. Great. Um, so I would say about a year ago, I had this. I was going through like a kind of a weird spell in my life. I had like a really bad relationship, and that ended, which was fantastic. But I was just kind of bummed out. Wasn't really happy with my job. Wasn't really happy with any relationships I had had. Post because I
How
was
old was
married, and
this?
I'm sorry, this was just about a year ago. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
maybe 2 years ago. but 2 years ago I split up with somebody, and it was a tough, difficult situation, and I was just in a weird funk, right? And I was
Mm,
sitting down, and I like to, when I'm in a weird funk, I listen to soundtrack music. It's comforting to me. And
mm-hmm.
so I put on the Inception soundtrack, and the song or the track
Yeah.
Time from Inception came on, and it changed. It's, I mean, I've listened to that track and that soundtrack since since the beginning, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but it just hit different this day, and I was just like, I'm gonna do this,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it takes. I'm gonna do this because it's like it means so much to me, and it has such an impact on me depending on my what I'm going through or whatever. And I know a lot of people are like that, and it's not just film music but music in general. And I feel like I'm getting too old to really be in bands. I'm kind of over that stage, and the partying and the nonsense is, I'm a little too mature for that now. So I was like, well, what's the most mature music thing I can do? And I was like, well, probably really take music seriously. That might be the first start, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So I did that. I started, writing, I started messing with softwares and stuff like that. I started basically with just a version of Logic that was just iOS, just to practice, right? Just to get my,
Right.
gears turning again, because it had been a while.
That was what
And
was it?
so
GarageBand, right? That's Logic's
um,
thing, isn't it?
well, okay, so I did start with GarageBand just to mess around, and I was like, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna keep, growing that. And so I started with GarageBand, and then they have Logic, they have a Logic Pro iOS, which I downloaded that too. And then I upgraded to Mac, and then full Logic X, and Logic Pro X, and I'm really excited about this journey. It's been really fun, and I've networked with some really cool people. So,
Do
but
you
yeah,
wish
that's
that you had started it maybe a little bit earlier? In hindsight, now that you've had a year under your belt with terms of more soundtrack and soundscape composing.
no, no, because the reason I say no is because the amount of patience and maturity that I think this type of music takes is, it's it's not, I think unless you are someone who's obsessed with it at a very young age, and like doing it regularly, playing in symphonic orchestras or whatever, things of that nature, and really have a fine understanding of what you're doing, I would say that I've needed uh, every bit of these last 30 years to get to this point, um, in order to sit down and know what I want. Because
Okay.
the hardest part of writing music, and especially something complicated like this, which it's going to take time to get, you know, to really hone it in, I, I just think that there needs to be a level of patience and maturity, and and a level of um, fight in you, in a way, because there's, if you're trying to make something that's complex, for example, or something that doesn't sound like everyone else, because the whole point is like, I want to do this, but I want to be an artist. I don't want to make a sync library with hundreds, thousand sounds that everybody's already done, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that was when I went into this, I initially was going to do that just for the fact of maybe getting some, you know easy money on the side for doing it, and then I said, I'm not doing that. I
What
have
DAW are you working in currently? Curiously.
Logic Pro X.
Okay, gotcha. I know there's a lot of people. Have you looked at curiously like FL Studio or something like that? I know that's a very popular one.
FL Studio I used for like 15, 20 years when I was younger.
Okay.
I think FL Studio is great, but I definitely prefer Logic currently. I don't know if it's the end all be all for me, but I'm enjoying it.
Okay. Were there any curiously? Are there any skills or understanding about music that translated from playing in live bands that surprisingly translated over to working in a digital workspace in terms of how you lay out the structure of your track?
Yes, yeah. So I mean, even down to place, where the note's going to hit and stuff like that. Absolutely, because like, yeah, I don't know if are you a musician at all? I don't know how
I've
to take.
tinkered around in it, but I've never,
Okay,
gone. But and I've gone through phases where I have studied a little bit about music theory.
okay, okay,
So
cool.
I'm very fascinated by it.
So playing with a live band, you can play the same song 1,000 times, right? And
Hmm.
then one time you play that song and it just hits different, and the whole band's like, "Oh my God, this is the best. That was the best version of that we've ever done," and it's the same song. And then you realize, like, over time of being in bands, um, why that is, and why that is when everything, it hits at the right moment. And I know that sounds, it's important, you know, it's important to have some drag here and some, you know, something hitting slightly before the beat in certain aspects of a track. And this is primarily to represent, because, you know, I'm not recording an orchestra, right?
Right.
I don't have the means or the money to do so. So
You got
I'm
to rely on all those plugins.
yes, you got to rely on the plugin. So if you and it's still a work in progress, right? But I think, you know, developing a sound that's, when you're writing, you want to develop a sound that's also useful, right? So the whole point is if, say, some large production company comes to me and says, "Hey, we really like your style, you know, can you score some scenes for us?" Yeah, sure. I'm going to score the scenes. And if they have the budget, they're not going to use my song. They're going to use, but they're going to use my score, right? So I'm
Right.
basically, the whole purpose is really to present what a larger production would want to lay in front of an orchestra and you know, and an orchestrator and all that stuff, and go, hey, you know, would this work? Can we do this? Or, you know, so that's kind of really, so having some music knowledge and some music theory under my belt helps. And then live playing as well. When I first started, I was just messing around and like, this sounds really cool. This sounds really cool. It's going to be being really kind of avant-garde, I guess, or, you know, with it. And even though it still was like, you know, decent sounding stuff, you know, I decided, I'm like, you know, I think a lot of people are really going down this road right now, because I think everyone is really truly trying to achieve that like Hans Zimmer sound. And it's like, yeah, but like he's doing it because he's been doing it for 30, 40 years. If you um if you look at his, I guess you could say his works over the years, um the way he sounded doing work for Disney, and then when something like Gladiator hit, right, and he was a
Hmm.
part of that, you can see the change in his trajectory as far as compositions go. Gladiator was very like, that soundtrack's very emotional. It's very drawn out. It's very like, it's very different.
Ethereal.
It's,
Almost
yes,
ethereal.
ethereal. Yes, yes, exactly. And I feel like he's really ridden that train since, because it is unique to him, and he does a really good job at it. I would love to try some stuff like that, but that's not what I want. I would love to be, you know, I would love to get into the position of something more like, I don't know, John Williams is cool because it's like he's scoring, you know, themes for
He
big
writes very
movies, and
complex pieces.
very complex, but he's also a safe composer, which is nice, because when you listen to his stuff, like, there's nothing that's, it's a rarity that you're going to hear something from him that I mean, everyone would pretty much like it, because his work is just music theory 101. I mean, there's nothing strange or unsafe about his works at all. I mean, so same with Hans Zimmer. His stuff is very, I wouldn't say it's as safe because of the sound engineering that he does, right? And the texturing in his tracks. But John Williams, though, is just very, you're never going to listen to a track by him and go, you know what I mean? It's going to always be what you
Right.
expect it to be. And that to me is more important than in reinventing the wheel, you know. Could I one day down the road? Sure. But I mean, these guys are, you know, old.
Do you think Hans
I've been doing
Zimmer's
a long time.
style of composing is going to be something that sticks around for the, in terms of popularity, the same length as John Williams for the rest of his life, or do you think it's going to be more of a
Ooh,
phase?
good question. I'll be honest with you. I don't think it's as original as people think. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's, I think it is original, but I think if you listen to when synthesizers came out, and then in the 80s when people, like, watch a sci-fi movie from the 80s, if you put really good production on that, is it that different? I don't know.
Hans Zimmer was like one of the first people to, I think, popularize in not such a like eclectic way the way synthesizers were used in like movies from the 80s, but to use it essentially as more of the as a texture and the basis
Yes,
for the atmosphere that the composition is written in. You know what I mean?
yes, yes. And which, I'm not taking any credit away from him. But yes, I agree. I think the pad, the atmospheric stuff that he's doing, Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. It's all about texturing and creating an atmosphere. So, um, I think, do I think it's going to stick around and continue? I think so. I think so. And I think a big part of that is probably just because of his success. But not only that, he's an amazing, I mean, his compositions through and through are, I mean, over the years are really spectacular. I mean, he does have a lot of that John Williams in him. He does
Mm-hmm.
have a lot of that John Barry in him. He does have a lot of that Howard Shore in him too. Like they all have their own sound, but the cool thing is that Hans Zimmer. If you go back to the Disney stuff, right? If you go back to his works for Disney, I mean, just fun, inspiring, catchy, some of the most iconic melodies of our child, or I don't know how old you are, but my childhood. um I mean, fantastic stuff. And then here we are with the Dune 2 soundtrack, right? Just bizarre and just, like the ethereal is a
The
great
Dune two
example.
sound, or the Dune sound is like, oh, what's that? What's that instrument that's it's like an Aboriginal Australian like long
Oh,
tube.
didgeridoo.
A didgeridoo, yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
didgeridoo on steroids.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as someone that has been, has made like EDM music and dubstep in the past and stuff like that, and was like super into all that stuff. When I listen to the Dune soundtrack, I'm like, I mean, it's great. There's some really good. There's some tracks on there that are really pretty, like they're very just beautiful, beautifully written, and they're very short, the simple pieces. But he has this elegance. This is where Hans Zimmer kind of blows everyone out of the water, is the elegance in what he does.
Mm.
That's really where it comes in, and that's learned.
His
And
stuff,
then I guess
it
I
never
guess
stays overstays its welcome either. He knows exactly when to let off the gas on the pedal.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he lets. I have a hard time with that. I don't like letting things breathe as much. But it's a work in progress. I like kind of chaotic. I'm a big fan of more chaotic compositions anyway.
Hmm.
But I think it would be a good exercise to maybe make some tracks that maybe bring that to the forefront. A little bit more patience and a little bit more, I don't know,
Hmm. So do you
organic.
work mostly alone now, in terms of like the craft of doing things, in just by yourself with the digital software, or do you do? Is there some degree of collaboration that you found like on the internet with people um, who have done soundscapes and scores for a bit longer?
No, I've been doing it completely myself, and just bouncing ideas off of some people who have been in the trade for quite some time. And I wouldn't say it's a collaborative effort. I think I would like to get into that. I would like to get to that point. But it's definitely been more of a just do it and then send it out there and ask for feedback. And I've also, it's been a nice way, experience to network with people who are, in the early stages of doing it as well. But then I've also talked with, some composers from, I don't know, overseas, right, that are just 70 years old and been doing it their entire lives. And I've been able to network with, the entire spectrum, and it's been really
Mm-hmm.
cool. So that's been exciting, and it's been inspirational. Um, yeah, yeah, I've been turned on to some music that really changed the direction, because I was posting stuff and then I had friends that were like, "This is crazy stuff, dude. Like this is like," and then other people were like, "I don't get it." And then I ran across this guy on a forum. He made a comment on something I posted on like a Facebook group, right, for composers. And so I looked into his stuff, and then he posted something shortly thereafter, and I looked into his music, and I feel bad because I can't. He's got a Swedish name, so I'm gonna mess up his name. So I'm not even gonna say his name. So,
The Swedish
but
dude.
Swedish dude, yes. But I mean, his works are absolutely phenomenal, just bizarro, and but at the same time beautifully done. And so it kind of re-inspired me to be like, you know what, I'm going to do what I want. I don't care if you like it. I mean, I
Mm.
care enough that if someone came to me and said, "Hey, I have this project and this is what I want," that's a different story. Currently, I'm making stuff that I like and what I want to do. And so there is a a dual world there, right? There's what you want to do as an artist, and then there's what's expected of you and what, so that's kind of where,
Hmm.
um, yeah, so that's kind of where it lies currently.
Do
So
you
I'm just
think?
going to keep doing
Go-
it.
Yeah. Do you think your creativity flourishes better in an environment of collaboration or solitude?
Well, that's a good question.
I'll throw you a softball next time. I'll ask you what your favorite color is. uh,
Um, oh, no, I like the good questions because it's actually, I mean, if we're going to have a talk about stuff, we definitely, I would like for it to be thought out, right?
what's
So
your
don't
favorite
ask me.
food?
um, eh, so as someone who's worked with other musicians in the past, right? Um,
Mm,
yeah, it's great. It's great writing music with people. There's something exciting about it. There's some sort of camaraderie that comes with it, and there's an energy there that's not really as much there when you're doing it solo.
mhm,
However, it's much less creative in my opinion. I think because you're coming together to try to work together and collaborate, but also there's a lot of negotiation with that. There's a lot of give and take and a lot of trying to figure out where we all enjoy this, right? So, and where we're all happy with the end goal and the end product. I don't know. I think maybe I would enjoy collaborating. I definitely would enjoy collaborating in this and doing what I'm doing now, but I don't know that I would. Um, I don't know that I would want to all the time, right? Like I really like.
you don't want to go
Um,
crazy.
yeah, yeah, you would go crazy because this is
Mhm,
hard to do by yourself. Like doing it with, like, I mean, if you look at some before Hans Zimmer was I mean, he's always been amazing, right? But if you look at like how many works he's done with other people before he started just doing his own, just doing sound, film scores or soundtracks just by himself. Um, there's a ton of people on those some of them sometimes some of those soundtracks. There's a lot of people on there, and I'm just like, how do you take someone like Hans Zimmer who's so particular and has such a sound? How do you collaborate with that? But it would be really cool to try. It'd be really cool to come together and see how that pans out. You know.
mm, okay. Um, Now here's another good one. When composing, how do you get into the flow state, and how do you keep yourself there for as long as possible?
Ooh, these are good. Holy cow. I've never done someone else's podcast before, so this is fantastic. So I apologize. I hope I'm doing okay.
Oh,
Hold
you're
on.
all right. I mean,
Okay.
it's like it's not like the thing with the podcast is like I'm just like when it comes to, and I don't want to interrupt your train of thought, but like my it's like, I think some people when they're doing podcasts, it's like they're worried about the product. It's just a conversation. That's all it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I think
Yeah.
people too much pressure. Like I think people put too much pressure on trying to make a show out of it. And
Yeah.
it's not. And then you kind of lose the identity of like getting to know how somebody else's brain works.
Yeah. We're just talking. Yeah. Absolutely. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
How do you get yourself into the flow state, and how do you stay there as long as possible?
Um,
Drugs.
no, no, no. No. I have a pretty boring life. I don't do drugs or drink anymore, really. Like I have a drink occasionally, but I miss the good old smoking some weed and playing some music days. I really do. Those are my favorite days of all time.
Hmm.
But I'm just in a different headspace now. I can't really, I think what's led me to this point. How do I get to the flow state? Let's answer that first before I go off on a tangent that has nothing to do with the question. Um, if Honestly, I just sit down and I treat it like work. I wouldn't say that the flow state comes. There's this thing that happens that once you like dial it in, right? Um, or you get some idea, right? And you put it down and it translates, or maybe like you hum something yourself, or you just mess around and just on the keyboard, and that's cool. Let's see if we can turn that into a song, and then by the end, it's not even what you started with, right?
Hmm.
I, I think that a lot of compositions write themselves, man. And I know I hate to say that. If you listen to someone who really engineered their stuff, like really said, oh, was just completely music theory about it, it's gonna suck a little. I'm sorry, but it is.
Yeah.
I don't care, and I don't care how good you are. I mean, I think the going back to John Williams, he is doing everything exactly how it should be done, right? But the emotion, the creativity, and the artistry comes from him being an actual orchestrator, right?
Mm.
So it's like he's not sitting in just at a DAW. He's sitting in front of an orchestra, right? He might use those the elements to write the score, but he's sitting in front of people going, "Hey, I want the winds to do this instead. I want the brass to do this instead," right? And so that is where his artistry and the soul comes from for him. I don't have that luxury, so not that that's necessarily a luxury. I think I would be overwhelmed if I was standing in front of an orchestra, and be like, I don't know.
Would you
But
like to do it at some point?
yeah, absolutely, yes, yes. But I know the amount of work that would have to lead
Yeah.
to that
Hmm.
is very daunting. But I would as far as the flow state, also like as you're right, you might. I'm very sensitive to music, so and what I mean by that is I'm easily triggered. Like it can trigger emotion quick in me, and not like change my personality, but it I can feel it, right? And it's probably just been because I've been a musician my entire life, and in order to like convince people that this is decent, right?
Hmm.
It has to at least convince you, right? It has to convince you of something. And so when I nail that or I get something in my head and I go, oh man, that would be amazing. I'll get it down. I'll start with maybe like a viola or a cello or whatever, right? Or some kind of bass line or something, and it just work build it up from there, and then go, all right, well, and then music theory comes in, right? Because then you have this part that grows, right, into something extraordinary, or it might calm down, but it's got to lead somewhere, right? So then you use music theory and go, okay, I know I got to go to this key now, right?
Mm.
Or I know if I want to go to this key, or if I have two different separate ideas and I want them to mesh, that's where music theory comes in. And I would love this. Just I really want to make that a solid point. When it comes to music theory, that's how you should use it. You shouldn't write with music theory. You should be direct guided by it, right? You should have direction with it. You don't sit down and go, because if you don't have that artistic side and you're just like, oh well, circle of fifths and blah blah blah, right? Like
Right.
what are you really creating at that point? Are you creating something that you believe in? Or are you creating something that someone wrote down in a book a long time ago that said, hey, this sounds pretty good,
Do you think music theory is prone to over correcting creativity?
I think it's no different than overproducing, right? You
Mm.
can produce
Yeah.
the soul right out of a song. A good example is I was in a band with my brother and a couple other people, and one the singer just never really played guitar, barely dabbled, and I've been a guitarist for like 20 years, but I'm like, hey, just pick up a guitar. Let's like, I think it'd be fun. It'd be cool to see what you write. And he wrote this. So he wrote some riffs that were like, I mean, they weren't fantastic, but they were something I would never think to write, and they were just beautifully done. Like not good, not amazing, but the soul behind them was he felt it, and you feel it when they feel it, right? So if I'm going to compose something, I have to feel it. It has to instill an emotion in me. And my stuff is very layered, the stuff I'm composing now. And back when I was in bands, that's how a lot of the bands I was in was very like that, right? Like there was no breathing. I mean there was, but there was like a purpose for it, right? It
Hmm.
was meant to be kind of like beautiful chaos, but then when there was time for rest, right, it was really meant to be there. And that's kind of how I'm composing, is that like, all right, well, if I want to start something beautiful, right, and lead into something a little bit more tragic, right, well then I know that I need some leeway, some breathing room before the tragic stuff. And but I still like a lot of stuff. I like a lot of noise. And I think it's important too. Okay, so going back, also circling around back to the Hans Zimmer thing, do you think it's gonna be like that forever, or like or I just hope that people don't just cling on to that and then everybody's using that style in their movies, because it doesn't work for everything, man. You're not gonna watch like Psycho or something and then have like a beautiful like
Yeah.
ethereal synth in it, right? So I mean, like you need all of this stuff. You need crazy cello, you need crazy horn slurs, you need crazy, staccato and stuff, and you need craziness, because that's part of the human experience. It's an emotional craft, man. And Hans Zimmer has really honed in on a very specific emotional state with a lot of his work. Now, not but then listen to the Batman soundtrack. That will blow your face off. And you're like,
Yeah.
this is, and it's all synthesized and it's all insane and it's in your face and it's loud and it's aggressive and it's mean. And it's like, okay. So the thing is that these film producers are obviously coming to him going like, I need this. Can you
Right.
just can you do that I like that Gladiator track, right? Like do something like that, but make it for me. And I'm sure there's a lot of that.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's talking about the Batman thing. Because I actually took his masterclass course. And
Oh wow.
yeah, it was like a, I don't know, 10, 12 episode thing. It was like, I don't know, an hour
Yeah.
long or something like that. But he, for the Batman theme, he wrote a longer, more heroic theme for it. Like the full, like those two notes that dun dun, like the just drag
Yeah.
out, and that are very present, and particularly the
Yes.
Dark Knight. Um, he that was actually what he reduced it down to because he realized his theme was too heroic for Batman. And that's just one of his theme. And I
Yeah.
just like, I'm thinking about like just the storytelling aspect of that level of creativity. It's like you wrote, and he played the actual full like piece for it.
Yeah.
Um and it was really good. If he had sat down in front of I'm sure he actually had a conversation with this, like, with the director and whatnot, with Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan. um, and he realized that just even though it was good, it wasn't right. And that's got to be like one of the
Yeah.
hardest things, especially like just as an artist. No matter
It's
what it
not. It's
is,
not.
is
I'll
put.
be honest with you. It's not hard. It's not hard. You can spend. I've spent 3 days on something, a piece that I was working for a friend of mine.
Mm,
3 days straight. Like, I mean, I'm talking. I had like 3 days off from work, and I'm like, I'm just gonna do this now. And I mean, no sleep. I mean, working at it. It's amazing. And same thing. Just like totally started from scratch. By the end, wrote this beautiful. Probably one of the tracks on my website. And I just like, well, I'll recycle that and just put it out as something I like.
hmm
And it's not because he didn't like it, it's because I realized like this is not the intention. um no, it's not hard at all. There's nothing wrong
because
with.
you're convicted about your decision and the moment of
Yeah,
like
well, that's
the
that's what's going
realization.
to make you. Yes, that's what's going to make you good. It's not whether or not you can do it. It's whether you can. It's what you don't like, right? You have to
Mm,
really know what isn't going to work, or not even that, because it could work and just not be good enough, right? You have to know when you're in over your head or you're doing too much, and for a particular experience, I guess. I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think there's anything frustrating about it. Like I said, there's works I've done that have taken me hours to do, and then there's works that I've done that have taken me weeks to do, and I'm talking weeks on end.
mm,
Um, so and then I'll be honest, some of the ones that write themselves and it takes a handful of hours to create are some of the better things I enjoy the most when I listen back to anything I'm working on or have worked on. So um, I don't know. I mean, I gotta do this master class. I gotta look into it. I actually signed up for master class. I started with Danny Elfman. So like
right.
Danny Elfman, I like Hans Zimmer, but Danny Elfman was more or less because I like the idea of I know how to use DAWs. I have for a long time. I know how to produce music. Danny Elfman, on the other hand, is like a freak of nature, right? Because
Mm.
he's just writing, he's like notating stuff and then just
He's
going, here you
speaking
go.
in music.
He's speaking in music. He's someone that I don't want to say he doesn't get the credit he deserves because he's obviously very famous, but I think people don't understand that level of genius is a whole different. I mean, his work. I mean, any soundtrack he's done has been wild, just absolutely
Right. Yeah.
wild. So to just sit there and go, all right, well, I'm going to score this, and like, oh, that'd be fun, and then and then some orchestrators are like, we can't even perform this. There's like all kinds of. I've watched a lot of interviews where he's like, yeah, orchestrators like hate some of my stuff.
One
So
of the funniest things I remember, actually, is that some piano pieces are nearly impossible to play for most people because the composers who wrote them, their hands were too big, and most people can't reach the keys.
yeah, yeah,
I think that's one of
yeah.
the funniest things that there is.
Um, I it's funny because Yeah, I don't like. That's another thing too. Is I don't know that I like the idea of just sitting at a piano and. I mean, I've definitely sat at the piano and wrote a lot of stuff I've turned into music or compositions. It's definitely how it mostly starts. But I mean, to sit there and like, I don't know if I could go the other route and just like notate stuff and just be like, all right, it'd
Mm-hmm.
be really. You kind of want to know the feel. You want to know what it's a process, right? You're like, it kind of feels right.
You're
It is kind of
exploring the
like,
darkness, and you're just trying to
yeah,
shine light on where you can see.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, but I mean, I guess that's what makes me creative is just that there is a bit of a thrilling experience with that, with chasing that, right? You're chasing the best thing you've ever done every time.
Right.
And,
That's the
and
high.
it's the high. Not that it ever is, not that it ever will be, right?
Right.
Not that it'll ever be amazing. I mean, it might be, I mean, I've also, have seen some interviews with composers that are, um, don't even listen to their own stuff. Like they're just like they'll just, come up with some ideas. They'll send a score to an orchestra, whatever, or to a film production, and like I think Danny Elfman has actually said that in some interviews that he's like, yeah, I heard it for the first time and like 20 years later, and I'm like, what?
That's
How?
crazy. I
How
don't
would
know
you?
how that. I couldn't
How
understand
do you
that,
do
frankly.
that? Yeah, so I don't like that. I would never do that. But I know I don't think I would ever write just writing it down on paper. I've done it. I've done it like just coming up with ideas like, all right, I know I want this chord, this key signature, um, uh, I want it to be in this key. I know I want to use these scales. You know what I mean? I know I want to like, double harmonic. Whatever, whatever it might be. Right? Like I'll come up with these ideas where I'm like, that would be cool, and then I'll sit down and play. Like that's cool, but it like locked me in right into this one phrase that I thought would sound amazing, and then it ends up being a partial of that phrase, right? To create an entire song. So it's like that's kind of how I'm composing now, as I'm taking these ideas that I'm like, oh, this is a great melody or something, and then I break it down, right, and then I turn it into a track, not using that melody. Like I'm using half of the melody here, half the melody here, and it's creating this whole different, a universe. I'm taking because that's the only way to really do it. If not always, I mean, you can branch off into other things, but now you're like, well, now this is a completely different track or
Mm-hmm.
totally different feel. So if a melody makes you feel something, but that melody locks you into a sound. See, a lot of composers have this tendency to just kind of repeat that melody or just make a 1 minute track, which I've been doing a lot of that too, like real short stuff. Because it's just easier to knock it out and go, cool, I like that idea,
And then
done.
you just put it out there real quick, and then now you got
Yeah,
more stuff for people to look at.
yeah, because I'm like, when I first started doing it, I'm like, well, I mean, some like, orchestration suites are like, I mean, you're talking about like 20, 15, 20 minutes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Between the three or four movements. And so you're like, you know what? I'm not doing that. I started doing that and I was like, no, I'm not doing that. Because then it's so much work, it's so much work. And then I'm like, I'm doing this for me. So I'm just going to do what I want and still showcase, what I can do, or at least my sound. I,
Mm-hmm. What's it like to be possessed by an idea you can't let go of?
ooh, what is it?
Is it painful? Is it all the emotions all at once? Like when you, because for me, it's like personally, like when, uh, just to set the context of the question, it was like when I'm writing, like I write screenplays,
Yeah,
um, and it's one of the most, and I'm possessed by something that like I really want to see if I can figure it out. Um,
yeah.
but it's also, it's because it just came to me. It's something that bugs me, and it's both. It's the most pleasant form of agony, that I don't know how else
Mhm.
to describe it. And I was just wondering, like, what does it feel like for you?
I would say that to each individual, that feeling is probably slightly unique. So, in you asking that question and giving a kind of a sort of an example, w- can you give me like an example of like, is it like you have an idea and you're trying to express that idea, but you don't know how to do it? Or,
That would be, yeah,
uh,
that would be one good example. So like, because sometimes like when you're possessed by an idea, you don't know if you want to follow through with that idea, but you're just curious enough that for some reason your subconscious won't let go of it, and you just randomly think of it another time. It's like, oh yeah, what about that one thing? And then it's for me, it's something that it's it's like a beautiful problem to solve, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's for me it's like, it's one of the most pleasant forms of agony because it means that
Yeah.
something in my mind is telling me that there's something meaningful to explore here, but
Yeah.
because it's sort of in the area of the unknown, in like the
Mhm.
darkness.
It's
You
part of the
can't.
muse, right? Like something's
Yeah,
speaking to you, and you wanna answer to it. You wanna
it's
either be the
seductive.
messenger.
It's very
Yeah,
seductive.
there is a lot of that. Actually, I wrote this piece called "Before You Know It" for my brother's son, my nephew, and it didn't start off. I didn't go into it with that intention. I started writing this piece, and there was a lot of time change. There was like it kept slowing down and then speeding up, right? And it just had
Hmm.
this push pull kind of feel, and a lot of like real interesting breakdowns where it's just like it goes from this huge sound to just a cello, right? And then violas come in providing a harmony to
Hmm.
that, and it was just like made me weep. I didn't even plan to write it. I started with this crazy like choppy staccato cello piece that was like dun 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 dun
Hmm.
dun 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 dun. I'm like, oh, this sounds like super renaissancey or something, but like aggressive at the same time. It ended up turning into this like piece that, and like this beautiful piece that I mean I would love to redo it now with a little bit more advanced stuff that I'm using now. I might do that. That might be a cool project. But I showed it when we first started our podcast. I showed it to him, and my brother is not the type. He does not. He loves music. He's a musician, but he's not an emotional musician. Right? The music does nothing for him emotionally. He's not crying because the
It's
song's
more of an
sad. You know what I mean?
intellectual exercise.
He's an yes. He's an intellect when it comes to music, and played that for him, and he actually bawled his eyes out. And I was like, "Holy crap, I've
Yeah, you got
done
to get
it!"
back to that, man. if that's if
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
reaction, yeah.
yeah. But I mean, you can't. You're not always going to have that. Not everything you're going to put out is going to be a banger. Plus, a lot of the stuff I'm putting out, I thoroughly enjoy, whether people like it or not. There's a not that not, and I don't mean that in an arrogant way. I'm not. I'm not. I don't have a client, right? Like I don't. I'm just doing it for fun, and I'm putting out stuff if I feel like it's completed, or completed enough that I don't need want to continue working on it. That's another thing, is that I'm surely on my website there's pieces on there that people listen to like I don't get like it doesn't sound fully mastered or this and that. It's because it's composition, man. I'm not
Right.
sitting here trying to sell you a top 40 song. I'm not selling
Hmm.
this to some famous singer right now. This is just me writing composition. It's just composition. So even if it sounded like like the first album I put out was sounded like video game music, because I didn't care. I wasn't too worried about the sound. I was more or less just trying to construct
When I
beautiful
was actually
arrangements.
listening to some of your stuff that you did put out, it did kind of some of the tracks did particularly remind me of like those early like PlayStation games, where
Yeah,
it's a very heavy on the brass and the synths.
yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
absolutely.
Is there a film or a genre of movies that you think that your skills would best shine in?
Ooh, I don't know. Um, that's a
Because
good
yeah,
question.
there's two. I mean, there's two different ways, obviously, to take a composition: more soundscape and like ethereal, kind of more like Hans Zimmer in a way. I'm not putting
Yeah,
down Hans Zimmer because he has some beautiful compositions.
yeah, yeah,
And then there's very obviously more orchestral takes, like John Williams, like you were saying. And
yeah,
there's the balance between those two forces, and
yeah.
those two forces, depending on how much stock you put in one or the other, lend themselves better to particular genres. So I'm curious, like if there's a direction that you love to go that you think because it's your favorite way to take a particular composition, that what genre would that fit in?
Um, Interesting. So, just so I get this clear, are you asking what media I would be that my work would mostly be applicable to?
Media or a specific genre
Style?
of film?
Oh, okay. Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that. I don't think when I write for that purpose,
Mm.
which is weird. I know that's really weird to say out loud, but I don't really write for that purpose, and the reason I don't is because I'm just writing music.
Well, I think too
With a,
few people say I don't know enough, honestly.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think I don't think I would want to know.
Mm.
I'll just say that. I don't think I want to know. I would rather create something that resonates, and wherever that's applicable, I would want it to resonate. So however that works, doesn't matter where. I'm
Mm.
not like, I'm not like, oh, let me score the next Indiana Jones or the next Lord of the Rings. To be,
Right.
ooh, I don't know if this is going to be kind of controversial as far as movies go, but
It's a podcast. It's not a podcast unless you say something controversial,
okay, well,
obviously.
let's get
Yeah.
into it. I'm a huge fan of his work. Huge fan of his work. Huge, huge, huge fan of his work. Did a lot of video game music and stuff, but you know, uh, the composer named Bear, right? He did like God of War, and he did a bunch of TV series, but he also
Mm.
did Rings of Power, Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power,
Oh, okay.
and, and I had never watched it, and I was like, I'm gonna sit down and watch this finally. I had like a little bit of time off, I'm like,
Rings of
yeah,
Power?
yeah, Rings of Power, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Uh, so I sat down and I watched it, and I was like, um, I mean, I love the show was decent, right? It was okay. I mean, it's
Mm.
not like it's a little too crazy for Lord of the Rings, in my opinion, but
I enjoyed
um,
it. Full disclosure, I did
yeah,
enjoy it. I thought it
okay,
was good. It was better
yeah,
than The
no, it's
Hobbit, in my
good.
opinion.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, but as far as like the composition goes, I was interested. It was interesting and it was good, but it wasn't like I was like, man, like you think for this TV series, there's a couple of things. I thought that there was a lack of originality, and not that it was bad by any means.
Mm.
I think it was too like anybody could have done that, right? And
Didn't really have a
you're
signature to it.
it didn't have a signature, and it kind of irritated me because I'm like, you're stepping like into the shoes of one of the greatest composers of all time, and no one said you need to fill those shoes.
Mm.
But someone like, in my opinion, if you're going to do a feat like that, you need to come off. You really need to create something, right? Like you need to find the pocket, I guess, if you will. Now there's the theme. The main theme is excellent. So
Mm.
don't get me wrong. It's not I don't dislike,
But they're
the
not
main
playing the
theme is
theme the
beautiful.
entire time the show is playing, obviously, you know?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. There's a ton of stuff in there. And there's a lot of, and this is probably, I think there's, I want to say like probably the people piecing it together probably didn't really do him justice because I feel like the timing on a lot of the tracks that he had made that they were using for different scenes was not great. And I feel exact same way about Dune 2, and that's controversial as hell, but I do not like, I love the soundtrack. The movie's okay. I don't like them together at all. And it might be controversial, but I just don't think they work. I don't think
What do you think doesn't fit with Dune 2?
uh, it's not the music itself because the music is perfect, right? The sound, I mean, phonically, it's perfect for that movie. It is not, it is the timing. They really did a poor job on piecing that because I can tell you right now, Hans Zimmer was not sitting in a studio. I don't know. I'm gonna say I would be really surprised if he was watching scene by scene and applying his works to those scenes. Someone did that themselves. And the reason I say that is because the timing in that movie is horrendous. The composition timing is so important.
Is there a
It's
scene
more
that sticks
important.
out that makes you think about that?
Um, there's a lot.
Okay,
I mean,
just like the
I
whole
would say,
thing. The whole
yeah,
thing's
the
jank.
whole thing, the whole thing. No, there's a lot of scenes in there where I just don't feel like it jives. It doesn't. It's the right sound. It's the right mood. It's the right mood. It's the right everything. But someone really did a bad job of placing it right
Mm.
onto the film. Almost every scene where there's some sort of real cinematic piece, it's like, that's not the timing. The timing is off, man. The timing is really weird. And like some of the really beautiful pieces that are written for that movie,
Like Kiss
where
the
there's
Ring. Yeah.
exactly, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't know, man. I just don't think they're placed well. I don't think it works. And maybe that's video editing, maybe that's the music supervisor, maybe it's a combination of the two. I don't know. But there's something about it that I understand it's fantastic, but there's no timing. There's like it's like I don't know. I could be wrong. I might need to get back into it and just give it another second try. But
Is it something
and
you
it wouldn't.
noticed on your on the first time you saw it? Like,
Yeah, yeah, right away. It
mm.
actually ruined the movie for me. Like I said,
Oh
music is one.
no,
Yeah,
no.
yeah, yeah. It did. It ruined the movie for me big time. The
Oh,
one scene, the scene where it shows like the fetus in utero and stuff like that. That like little cut scene.
yeah, yeah.
That scene was really cool. And all the sound and stuff like that was really good. When the whatever the blue crap, the spice or whatever,
Hmm.
whatever it was, I don't know. I
Magic
don't. I
potion.
don't. Magic potion stuff, whatever. Yeah, was when they infected her with it or forced her, whatever it was, right? And then they
Hmm.
realized that she was
She
the
was pregnant. Yeah.
visionary realized she was pregnant. Yeah, that scene is the best scene in that entire film, in my opinion. And the only reason is because the sound engineering and the just every part of it was, in my opinion, effectively done. But there's too many scenes. Also, there's a weird part where I think he's walking up, and then there's like, I gotta remember. I'm sorry, this is kind of fleeting. So if I'm incorrect, I apologize. But there's a scene where he's like at some kind of like walking up to
Canceled
something.
immediately.
Huh?
You're canceled
Canceled. Yeah, he doesn't
immediately.
know what he's talking about. Don't listen to him. And there's like all these like people on foot, right? Like running away, whatever. And it's like epic, right? It's like kind of like battles type music, right? Or it gets into that, right? Well, right before that, there's that little phrase from whatever the pretty song is. What is it called? Because I can't think of the
Oh,
name. I
I
don't
know who
know.
you're talking about. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the phrasing and that, the pretty song from that soundtrack. There's a clip where it, like right before that, it has that again, and then it's like all of a sudden they're all rushing, and then like this very generic like, hey, we're on foot and we're trying to get somewhere, like
Dun, 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 dun,
music
dun, dun,
starts.
dun,
Yeah,
dun, dun.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I'm like, it was just so I don't want to say it was poorly done because that's unfair. In my taste, I didn't like it. I did not.
Mm.
I'm like, man, it's like this is a huge movie. And like I think people from the I think lower budget films in the 80s had better timing with their sounds. And there's no, I think in this day and age, my point is there's no excuse in this day and age. It's so easy to sync anything to anything. Are
That
you
right.
kidding
Yeah,
me?
because you got the
There's
digital
zero
softwares.
excuse.
Yeah.
I don't, yeah, I mean, there's zero excuse for it. And so when it's not perfect and or not even okay, and you're not gonna, and most people aren't gonna notice it, so they probably don't really care that much because I think it matters more than people know though, because the timing, like back when they were scoring music directly to the picture, right? The motion picture,
Hmm.
when they were scoring, that had a complete, that's different. That's like the John Williams style, right? Where,
Hmm.
hey, I'm in front of the orchestra, we're gonna write this, we're gonna score this thing. Oh, well, let's do
They're
this.
playing the movie in the
But
background, and he's
I'm
timing
playing
it.
the
With the yeah.
exactly. Like, man, like I understand that if you're not gonna do that, right? It's not going to have maybe that effect, but man, I mean, had that guy that's sitting at the computer, man, like really keep an eye on that dude. You know what I'm saying? Keep an eye on that dude and make sure that
Yeah.
whatever he's doing is resonating. And you're like, well, the sounds do resonate. I was like, but imagine how much more they would resonate if it was perfectly right when that emotion hit that actor's face, the
Mm.
sound hit your ears. That's the point, right? As soon as you believe the actor, you should the music's supposed to like go, it's true, you know?
Do you think this? So basically, it sounds like the way you're describing it in terms of the score goes, is that um, the plot and the emotion were out of sync.
No, no, not necessarily.
Okay.
Music is the great like persuader, right? The actor, oh, I don't know if that's entirely true either. The actor is kind of like is convincing us of something, right?
Hmm.
But then like the music's kind of like that, like that like stamp that's like, yep, this is what's going on. Okay. And while the sound and the emotion was there, actually, it's quite the contrary. The emotion was there, the plot was there, everything was perfect, other than the timing was off enough that to me that the it almost mitigate it almost was its own um it almost kind of drew away from the attention. It drew the attention away a little bit for me personally. When that timing is perfect, man, I'll give you a good example. When I watched, I saw Inception when it first came out in theater. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and that last scene, dude, that last
Oh yeah,
scene,
yeah.
right? The, you, it's not about the story. It's not about the even the visuals. It's almost not. I don't even know what it is. There is some sort of like magic, right, that comes from a visual audio relation in your brain that really triggers emotion, right? And there's a lot of that, and a lot of Christopher Nolan movies have that for sure. Um, and I feel like when it movies that miss the you know what I mean, miss that
Mm-hmm.
mark a little bit. I notice it a lot, but that's just because I'm a music. I'm just psycho when it comes to music. Like it's really important to me. Like when I go
Like a
watch a film.
psychological phenomenon that like your your state of mind is set in this space that can only be described as limbo when
Yeah.
those two forces are perfectly aligned with their goals and their intentions.
Yes. Absolutely.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah.
What aspect and yeah, uh, what aspect of music or composition do you think doesn't get talked about enough for people who aren't into music? Like there's because there's people who are into music that are very they can be very nuanced, very intellectual about it, and not a lot of stones necessarily get left unturned for musicians. But what do you
Yeah.
think most
For
people
people that
who
are
aren't
not musicians.
musicians, yeah, for who are
Okay.
not musicians, aren't aware of and they should be from the creative aspect of it?
Ooh. Not talked about
Oh, my
enough
neck. Oh
from
God, I'm
from the
dying.
from
It's okay.
the from the creative aspect. So are you talking about in the act of creating what needs to be talked about, or is this something about like how would you speak to someone who wants to do it, or is it more or less like
It's more of an
something
open-ended question, like the either the creativity or a particular nuance that holds a lot of weight when it comes to composing a soundtrack.
nuance? Ooh, let's talk about nuance,
Hmm.
and then I maybe some creativity stuff. So nuance, there is a purposeful. I like to write things that have a sense of dislike in them. Like I like to write things that have something that isn't entirely perfect, because I think that's where the soul lies. The soul lies in music, in the purposeful dissonance, in the um, I think it's more than we know. Because if I go and I take and I play, like for example, when you're learning a song, right, on a piano, right, and you're just playing, right, and you're like, this sounds terrible. Why does it sound like it's great? It's a perfect C major chord. Why do I hate it though? Because it has no soul. Major regular chords don't have any soul. They develop soul by the resonance that vibrates the chord. That joins that chord in the sonic vibrations that make you
Mm.
feel certain type of way. And so purposeful dissonance is more important than the chord you're playing itself. 100%. Now, there's a lot of music theory behind that, obviously, and a little bit of music theory, a lot more like jazz stuff. And luckily, I have a slight jazz background. So for me, I know that if I'm playing like a flat or sharp of something, and like for example, the last track I just put out, there's a like staccato cello, right? And it's just, it's like doing all this crazy stuff, it's like battle
Mm-hmm.
music sort of, but not really. It's kind of mystical too, right? Or whatever, or mysterious. Um, there's a lot of off notes compared to the melody. And I was like, do I want to change those? And then I thought, well, no, because it's like it's percussive and those notes are kind of making you confused a little bit. It's not so bad you can't listen to it. It's actually not bad at all, but it's enough that you're going to notice it. And honestly, it cuts through the track because of it too. So it's like I don't have to keep the cello super high. I don't have to like boost that part because it's like a real quick chop, you know what I mean? Like da da da
Mm-hmm.
da 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 da, whatever, right? So like because it's dissonant, it cuts through and it does kind of create this level of mysteriousness that wouldn't have been there if that was perfectly in key. So it's like almost you kind of need that, and you kind of that's the when back circuit cycling back when you're like, do I wish I would have started sooner? I'm like no, because I'll tell you right now,
Mm.
if I sat in a professional studio, I could write. I can make something that's much more masterful now than I could have 20 years ago, for sure,
Mm.
for sure. So, um, yeah, and a lot of that is knowing where the dissonance works really well, or even knowing where it doesn't work, but you want it to not work. Like you're really I'm not composing music so you can kick back and by a fire and sip your tea and just enjoy. This isn't what I'm doing.
Mm.
I do that to my own stuff, but that's just because I'm like, all right, does this suck? You know, uh,
You're like, did I
that's how
fuck
I,
it up? I don't know. I need
oh,
another shot.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, there, I don't know. Purposeful dissonance is really important. I wrote this track that's a little bit more dancey. That's on like this, like a second. I don't know. It's on. I have a couple of fun little EPs. One's called Peace War Redemption, and one's called Epicus. Well, there's a track on Epicus called Qualm,
Mm.
and it was one of the first tracks I put on Instagram. I put some other stuff, but it was one of the first video. I made like a little public domain video for it and stuff, right?
Okay.
And I was just like, oh, this is fun, you know. And it's kind of dancey, and it's kind of like, but it's also crazy. It's all over the place. And I showed it to some people, and they're like, this is like, I don't get it. Like, it's insane. I don't understand what's going on. And then some people were like, this is amazing. And then that's when I kind of realized that like it's a song where like it's dancey and it has a hook, it has a bridge, it has a chorus. Like it's almost like really like you know traditionally like arrange not like orchestration, but like traditionally like top 40 music arrangement, right? But it's like
Mm.
using cellos and violins and stuff, and also using like some heavy drums, like EDM drums and stuff too. Well, the thing is it doesn't resolve until the very last measure of the song.
Mm.
So, and people will go like, why would you do that? I was like, because it was fun. It was fun to do that. I don't care. Like, I didn't write it so you could put it on and show your friends. I wrote it because it tells a story, and the story's like, it's real, like ethereal. It's real, dissonant. It's got a lot of pads and stuff, and it moves in and out of itself, right? And it was just kind of a fun chord progression kind of really, it started as an exercise. I was like, I want to figure out some jazz chords that I want to incorporate into like maybe like a classical style piece. But then I was like, no, screw this is gonna be like a jazzy dance song with orchestration in it. And it's wild. And I hated it because other people made me hate it. My brother was like, it sounds so off, like there's so many off notes in it, I hate it. And I'm like, all right, well, I swept it under the rug, right? And it's still
Mm.
out there, right? It's on my album and still whatever. And I hadn't listened to that album in months and months. And so I went back and I listened to it, and I was like, this is amazing. This is so good. I mean, because it resonates with me. That's why I did it. Because I know what it's supposed to represent. It's not supposed to be, it's dancey, but it's dancey in a way to like inspire. It's like an inspirational kind of thing, but it also ends with it goes from this very like diminished kind of all over the place jazzy sequence of chordings and including like a sort of like verse bridge chorus
Mm.
you know way, but then that last chorus, right, the last half of that chorus goes right to major, the major scale of that
It finally gets
same.
resolved.
It gets resolved finally at the end. And I don't know, you wouldn't do that normally in music, no. I mean, but it was really fun to do, and I liked it
Or you were
because it's
just like
like,
in a very interesting mood that one day, and you're like, you know what? Screw it. I'm gonna do it.
yeah, yeah, no, I don't think it wasn't actually. It was purposeful, but I didn't. I was actually writing it with the intention of not resolving it. And then I think it was when I started coming up with the idea for like the arrangement of public domain clips, right?
Mm.
That I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I should probably get some stuff together to see if I can like make a little video to post this on. And originally it was going to be something dark and dissonant because it really started that way. It started as kind of a dissonant, but also jazzy kind of track. And then I was like, you know what? No, I don't want to do that. And then I turned it into like an actual song. And then I was like, cool. And then by the end, it was like, I don't know, let's just resolve it in this one section and see what happens. And I'll tell you what, man, I enjoy, I don't care if no one on planet Earth likes it. I really don't. And I will never care. I love that track. It's one of my favorite things I've ever made, and it's not even that great. It's just fun. It's fun, and
It's
I'm
an
a bit of a
interesting
troll.
dichotomy. It's like, you know, something that it's like I don't, you know, it's like it's one of the things like, you know, you love it, but you also know that most people aren't going to necessarily love it the way you do.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah. Why do you
If I
think
was
you find
working for
yourself
them,
being okay with that? Like, how do you get to that state of where it's just bliss of just not not necessarily caring about what other people think? Because I mean, obviously,
yeah,
it's very healthy that you shouldn't care what other people think. And then on the other hand, it's like, well, I mean, we're all humans and living life
yeah,
together. It's like, you know, you kind of should care what people think. Well, where do you?
yeah.
How did you strike that balance within yourself?
So, you can't make everybody happy, and especially in music. I mean, there's a very specific taste. Imagine the first jazz musician sits in front of a piano, right? I don't say the first because obviously it's a progression of
Right.
ideas, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But let's imagine, some crazy fusion jazz with a lot of weird dissonance and weird notes. Say Victor Wooten, right? Stands in front of like the original jazz musician and go, "Hey, there's no wrong notes." Do 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 do. They're like, "What are you doing, man? Stay in key."
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to ever like I've been playing music, I know music theory, and I've been playing music 30 years. If I play a wrong note, I did that on intentionally. You see what I'm saying? Like I'm
Yeah.
doing it intentionally. I'm not doing it because I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But you hear it. We're also the Western ear and the pop music that we have is so it's so like, you know what I mean? It's so like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, this major chord, minor chord. It's there's really
You can
not
predict it.
maybe it's very predictable, but it's not even that it's predictable. You can predict crazy shit too. It's not that it's predictable. It's that it's too palatable. It doesn't if you create a sonic landscape that's pretty dull but also gets the job done enough, it's good enough to get the
Mm.
job done, you can now showcase the singer, right? You can showcase other people in the, or other things, other avenues. It doesn't have to be about how great the music was. And so like considering that the most music we listen to is in that vein, well, of course, like when you hear a dissonant track that has a lot of bizarre jazz chords in it, and then I have a lot of actually orchestrated. I have a lot of orchestral style pieces too that have a lot of weird dissonance, and people are like, "Oh, why would you do that?" I was like, "Have you ever listened to an actual like orchestration that isn't like Bach or Mozart? Like, go listen to like some composer, like the guy from Sweden, for
I
example,
love
or go listen
Tchaikovsky
to
personally.
yeah, exactly, exactly, or um oh, it's fleeting. Oh, John Barry. John Barry's a good one. He was doing films and doing the most dissonant crap I've ever heard in my life. And
Mm.
at the time, it was unheard of. That guy was John Barry's groundbreaking. The stuff he did in James Bond and Dances with Wolves and other things. I mean, it's Dances with Wolves not as much, but his work specifically on James Bond is
Mm-hmm.
so dissonant and groundbreaking. You have something this beautiful piece, and then all of a sudden, it's like just piano crashing sounding and wind chimes and the wind instruments going up and down and flailing and you're like, what? Like this wasn't, like that's
Mm.
what imagine what people thought when they heard that for the first time. Like, what the hell is this guy doing? But it's iconic, man. It's
It's just a
iconic.
degree of personal authenticity. You know, I think a person just that arrives at where they're okay with whoever doesn't like it, because they're completely comfortable with expressing their sense of identity through their craft.
Another example is it's how it's used too. In my head, when I create something, like I have a hard time using my own stuff and like trying to make little videos for whatever, just to
Mm-hmm.
go, hey, look, this is what I did. And here's something visual to go with because no one gives a crap about music like that. No one's gonna be like, oh, he composed this. How cool. No one
Mm-hmm.
cares. Like, so you gotta have some visual stuff. And so, like, yeah, I'm like throwing like some public domain videos together. And whether they work or not, it doesn't, I honestly don't care. It's not about that. It's about I'm just trying to get my stuff out there so that
Mm-hmm.
someone goes, hey, I like the way that sounds. That's all it is. It's all it is. And but that being said, um, I have a hard time using my own work.
Mm.
So like I have a hard time going, what would be a cool scene for this thing I'm working on? Right. And then how am I going to clip a bunch of like B grade, clips that people post, freely online and make that into something that is tangible. It's very different. That the hardest thing about the process is literally me trying to advertise that I wrote something new, so they go to my website. That's it. That's it. I
Yeah,
mean, honestly,
yeah.
writing music is not hard. Even if it took me a month to write a song, it's not. That doesn't mean it's any harder or easier. It just means it does. It. I mean, I've got probably 30 tracks right now that within the last, I don't know, maybe like 2 or 3 months that are just been on the back burner because I'm like, I don't. Great start, and then I just like, I don't know what to do with that, and I just
Mm.
move on.
Do you
Just
have a
move
lot of
on.
those just sitting in a giant bin of unfinished tracks?
Oh yeah, yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. I probably have. Yeah, I don't know how many, but yeah, a lot. Yeah,
Mm.
I'm okay with it though.
Well, that's
You
good.
know,
I
it's
mean, that's certainly a level of comfort. I mean, I want to like, I'm very much the same way, but it's because it's sometimes it's because of a level of cynicism. I think that might be unhealthy. It's not necessarily because that's where you want to be. It's kind of where you think you ought to be, you know. And so part of the comfort I think of just that level of authenticity is it's not like it's not a state where you're what is it? It's like you're not vengeful against something, you know, that is in terms of that thing's relationship to you or your work, but it's
mhm.
just it's a state of I can only describe it as blissful existence, you know, and I think
Yeah.
that's where the best form that's the best place to be when it for an artist. I think to
Well,
generate
I
the most
think
authentic work.
I'm just the messenger. That's the way I look at my when I sit down and I write a track or whatever. I'm just the messenger currently because I'm not. If I have a client, of course I'm going to be like, yeah, whatever you want, man. You want some quirky sounding stuff or whatever.
Like you said,
Yeah, if
that's a
I'm doing
different thing, though. You
that's a
know.
whole different and when there's a difference between the artist and then the work, right?
Mm.
Work versus the art is a completely different thing. Right now I'm just honing in skills so that way when someone comes to me and goes, hey, I really like, or maybe someone comes to me and goes, hey, I really like this track, if I could get something, not that but like something similar for this scene.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm like, I've already done it, right? So that's what I do. I just keep
Right.
putting out stuff that I like or that's decent to me. And you know I don't know. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, it's a, I don't know. It's a lot of work, but I enjoy it. I'll probably take a break soon because I put out a lot of stuff in like the last 3 months.
Mm.
Kind of getting drained. My brain's pretty drained.
Yeah, I
But
feel
but a
that.
lot of that was also learning a lot of like software stuff and plugins and stuff I want to
Oh,
use
that'll
and
drain
whatnot.
you. That'll drain you real
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah, it sucks.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's a it's an interesting experience for sure.
Well, Chris, I thoroughly enjoyed talking to you. I appreciate you coming on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any final thoughts you want to leave with the audience?
Uh Not really. No. I mean, thank you for
You're
having
all
me
good to
on.
go.
Yeah, yeah,
Nice.
yeah, yeah. Everything's great. It was a good conversation, and it was some great questions. I don't know. I've never really like I wasn't anticipating there would be like real solid questions. So
Oh
that
yeah, I
was
never did
great
find
though.
out what your favorite color was. You know, now that I think about
Oh,
it.
I don't know that I have one, man. I think it depends on my mood, probably.
Yeah, it's like yeah, we wake up in the morning and it's just like black. I love
Yeah,
black.
yeah, yeah. I definitely enjoy black a lot. It's not a color though. I would say I don't know, green. I
Hmm.
got that light behind me. Maybe that's
It was the most
uh,
important question I had to ask you. You know, just
yeah,
that's it.
yeah.